Hey YouTube, here's Heiko. I'm down in my garage and I'm looking at my R90. Yesterday during my evening ride, my charging system failed like suddenly. The symptoms were while I was riding that at idle I have no generator light, alternator light whatsoever, and the common normal behavior would have been at idle my alternator light is always flickering, so indicating low charging voltage, and then as I rev it up the light turns off and then you have a decent charging voltage. And this pretty much reversed. At idle, no alternator light, and at high RPM, full bright alternator light. And then later when I was in my driveway, I hooked up a voltmeter to my battery, and even with engine running and high RPM or not, I would just have the battery voltage, which was around 12.6, 12.7 volts at that point. Since the charging system failed halfway through my ride, I burned through some power, I guess. So I drained the battery quite a bit. So now it's sitting here at 12.6 volts. And I just pulled out my little book. Let me switch the camera around real quick. Instead of looking at other manuals, I just pulled this out, Classic Boxer Charging. This is literally a book that only revolves around the electrical system of an Airhead. And, it helps troubleshooting the charging system. And so then I went to the section that talks about here, voltmeter, and then it shows the different components, the alternator, the diode board, the voltage regulator, and so on, and different locations. And then we eventually got to the point where it actually starts troubleshooting, and here we go. So the alternator rotor testing, which is probably one of the most simple things that you can do. It says you have to lift the brushes off of the commutator. You can do that, or you just disconnect the wires that go to the brush holder. So the brushes are not connected to the wiring harness anymore. So that's what I did. And then they give you some ohms here. So between 70 and 73, if you measure the resistance from one commutator, the little spinning copper thing, to the other, it should be 6.9. In my case, 3.4 ohms. And then I just did that here real quick. Let me turn on some light for you. Darkness. So you can see here behind my silent hectic ignition rotor, you see the two commutator, what is it called? My goodness, what's English? The brush thingies. Okay, so here's the brush holder. You see the little copper strands going in there to the brushes, and then the two connectors. So it's kind of a pain in the butt to lift the brushes off and then secure them in location. So I just went ahead and disconnected the wiring harness from the brush holder, and then took my trusty ohm meter out. So here's a rotor spare that I have, and I hope this one is good. So yeah, you are supposed to have continuity from this to this contact. If there is no continuity, then you can see the windings in there. They are damaged somewhere or broken, disconnected. So that's pretty much the easiest test to the stator. Disconnect the brushes, test. If there would still be some continuity, to make sure that there is no short circuit somewhere in this winding inside the rotor, they give you this the resistance there. So then you just look at what year you have, what value you're supposed to have. And it also talks about here in this booklet, if charging indication, hold on, let me turn off the light. If the charging indicator light does not come on at all, or if it flashes erratically at high RPM, the rotor is likely to be at fault. Perform the charge indicator light test as described on page 13. Of course, I haven't done that yet. If the charge bulb lights, then quick test the rotor by turning on the ignition and contact both rotor slip rings with a conductor such as a coin, knife, or screwdriver blade. What? If the charger bulb lights, then quick test the rotor by turning on the ignition and contacting both rotor slip rings with a conductor such as a coin, knife, screwdriver blade. The charge light should burn brightly, which verifies the condition of the brushes circuit and clearly indicates a rotor with an open circuit. So yeah, I guess we could do this. I'll just hook up the wiring harness back to the brushes, connect my battery. Before you take the cover off here in the front, you always have to disconnect your battery. I guess you have heard that a million times. So I guess we could do that. And if I then connect the two slip rings, that's the technical term, then my generator light should come on brightly. I know that my indicator light is working because, you know, while I was riding, it was on at 4,000 RPM. But I guess this test kind of verifies if the circuit to the light is working. So I guess we're going to do that. I haven't really done much else. I have only taken those two wires off to test continuity. So let me hook up my battery real quick, and then we're going to do this one simple test. All right, guys, so now we're set up for this test. I guess I didn't quite follow exactly the order of testing for the alternator system here. So first of all, you of course need to make sure that your generator light in your instrument panel is working properly. So in my case, I have a cat dash LED replacement system in there. So I don't have individual light bulbs, incandescent light bulbs that were stock back in the days. And I already know that my red LED for the generator light is working. So we didn't need to test the light bulb. Then the second test you would do is testing that the wiring that goes from your alternator all the way up to that light bulb is working the way it's supposed to be. So that's why they suggest you turn your ignition on. As you can see, lights on, dashboard's lit up, except the generator light. And now we're supposed to use a flathead screwdriver and bridge from one slip ring to the other. And then as we do that, we're supposed to look at the alternator light and to just test the entire wiring from down here up to the dashboard. If you bridge those two, yeah, my alternator light, generator light is coming on here. I'll let you guys see that. I hope I can do that two-handed here. Yeah, looks good. Can't even, oh my goodness gracious. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, you make a connection between those two slip rings, and then your light's supposed to turn on. So we now have already two things verified. We have verified that the light bulb is working, that the wiring between the alternator and the light up there is not disconnected. And actually the third test I did as the very first one, I disconnected the connections to the brush holder and then tested the continuity from one slip ring to the other. And I guess we could verify that one more time just to be consistent here. So I changed the setup a little bit. Now you can see what I do, and you can see the display. So just to verify, we have continuity between my test leads, and then you're supposed to hold it a little bit. So right now we have 0.7, 0.6 ohms, 0.7 ohms resistance in just the test leads, which isn't great, but yeah. And now I'm just gonna touch the two slip rings without touching any body parts of the motorcycle. And so now I'm touching both slip rings and there's no continuity. So now we know, oh, maybe I should have taken this off. Let's do that again. Now we know that our rotor is kaput. So now let's go over to my replacement rotor, take the multimeter with us and test that one, and then see what kind of resistance we get. So here's the spare part. Let's go back to ohms and touching both slip rings, and we get 3.6 ohms. Can you see that even? No, I of course put it that way so you cannot see. You gotta wait a little bit. 3.8. So if I'm not completely mistaken, the book says 3.4. I would say that we're probably in the ballpark. Since my multimeter is not the greatest quality, it already has resistance in its own test leads, which is 0.4, 0.5. Yeah, let's verify that. Now you wait a little bit. It literally shows 0. That's dumb. No. 0.1, 0.0. Okay. Yeah, we're supposed to have 3.4 and we get 3.6. I think we're in the ballpark. There must be no continuity or ohm reading between either slip. There must be no continuity or ohm reading between either slip ring and the rotor body ground, as this indicates a short circuit. Okay. Note that while rotors of all model years will physically fit into all engines, full charging may not be possible if the wrong rotor-stator combination are used. The higher resistance value of the stator used from 1990 the higher resistance value of the stators used from 1990s on will prevent full charging. It's not higher, it's lower. I mean, you guys help me out here, but the book says 1990 and later, it's actually the lowest resistance. The high resistance value of the stators used from 1990s on will prevent full charging if used with any pre-1990 rotor. Okay. However, the 2.8 ohm rotor used on the post-1990s models will work well in any early model. The combination will in fact provide the best charging characteristics because of its higher resistance. That doesn't make sense. What? Note that while rotors of all model years will physically fit into all engines, Full charging may not be possible if the wrong rotor stator combination are used. The higher resistance value of the stators used from 1990s on will prevent full charging if used with any pre-1990 rotor. Okay, that makes sense. However, the 2.8 ohm rotor used on the post-90s model will work well in any earlier model. This combination will in fact provide the best charging characteristics. Because of its higher resistance, a later model stator cannot be used with any pre-90. Okay, so I guess we know that we have this rotor here is from a 1974 to 1989. That's the best I have. That's the only I have. I guess we could do one more test. Alternator rotor removal, stator. We could do some stator testing, but I'm pretty sure that we already found our culprit here. The smoking gun is that there is no continuity between the two slip rings. I'll clean this one up. There's a little bit of some dirtiness and some rustiness. And then the taper back here needs to be absolutely grease-free. Same is with the end of the crankshaft that it will be mounted on. It needs to be completely grease-free. And then we're going to put it back together. Just to be thorough, we're going to do the test slip ring to ground. So there shouldn't be any continuity between either of the slip rings and ground, or else there is a short circuit. So if I touch one slip ring and then housing, oh, there, short circuit. And that one, this one doesn't, this one does. So we already know that there's a short circuit in the rotor somewhere. Next thing, I just want to go through the motions here and test the stator. So we disconnected the battery ground. Now we're going to disconnect the 3 wires that go to the stator connector, which is 3 wires from the terminal block on the left front of the alternator and from the Y terminal on the right side. So this here is the Y terminal. So now we have it all disconnected, nothing touching. Don't want to cause any. And then these wires here need to also be held away. Okay, no connections. And then we're going to take our ohm meter to one of the 3 terminals and touch the other probe to each of the terminals respectively. Check that there is continuity between any one terminal and others. Then hold the probe to the alternator housing or engine and touch the other probe to each of the terminals. Make sure there is no continuity. So we're supposed to, here, let me move over to the other side so it's a little easier to see. There are the 3 terminals that we're talking about. Let me get the probes here. And we're going to continuity tester that beeps. So we're supposed to have continuity between each of those. And then no continuity if you touch ground or the housing. Okay? So our stator is already behaving normal. And then let's continue. Make sure there is no continuity or ground, as this would indicate a short circuit to ground in the stator. All right, and then actual resistance values between any 2 terminals should be within a few tenths of the following reading. 0.6 ohms. So now I'm going to put this here back in front of you. We're going to just auto ohm. So if I hang this here, then you can see it, right? Like so. All right, between any two of those three terminals, 0.6. 2, 3. Okay, that's 0.6 right there. That's close. And then last one. Yeah, that's all very close. I think we're right in the ballpark there. I don't know if I tested all combinations. All right, so that looks good. Readings which are significantly different, 1 to 2 ohm, will probably indicate a stator with reduced performance. The AC output terminals on the terminal block must be kept clean and tight, or overheating of the stator and the connection wires may occur. Most older machines will benefit from having new, heavier gauge wires with solder terminals. This is especially true if the original wires to the 3 terminal blocks are of the type with a molded rubber plug encapsulating the terminals. All right, so I think we kind of are already at the end of our... Oh yeah, just one more time. So this is a stator for the older models, and this is the stator of the newer models. So they say that you can use a 1990s and later rotor with the older stator, but not the other way around. You cannot use a older rotor in a newer stator. So we have this, and we pretty much have the same age range of replacement rotor. So next step will be that I disassemble all this, take the housing off, take my ignition rotor off, and then we pull the alternator rotor out and replace it.